Welcome to another evening with Neighbors on Call. I'm Susan Blunt, one of the directors, and Becca Zirkin, our other director, is here too. Welcome to you all. Now, Neighbors on Call is an all-volunteer organization. We are a partisan group, and our primary goal is to elect Democrats to the North Carolina General Assembly. But not tonight, we are here to discuss a nonpartisan issue, fair maps. According to the U.S. Constitution, every 10 years after the census, every state across the country draws new electoral district maps. We'll get not only new maps for the U.S. Congress, including an additional congressional district bringing us to 14 seats, but also for the state House and Senate. Now, one of the challenging things about North Carolina's redistricting process is that it is managed only by our state legislature. There is no independent commission, as some states have, and our governor cannot veto the plan. It's just a simple majority vote in both chambers of the legislature. As you know, the maps drawn by the North Carolina legislature in 2011 were seriously gerrymandered, so much so that years of litigation followed in state and federal courts, leading to a redraw in the middle of the decade, and then a partial redraw of that redraw. But even with those small improvements, we're living under maps that don't reflect the will of the people. Our state votes 50-50 Democrat and Republican, but our representation is skewed to the right. Our congressional delegation is 5 Democrats and 8 Republicans. Our state House has 51 Democrats and 69 Republicans. Our state Senate has 22 Democrats and 28 Republicans. That means that the policy our legislatures make doesn't reflect the will of the people in the state. Now, if you're thinking, oh, well, it could be worse, our state policy could be even further out of whack from what the people have in Texas. Well, yes, it could be that bad. And right now, there are really only 2 things standing between us and Texas. One is that our Democratic governor elected in 2016, Roy Cooper, can veto any really bad legislation that's passed. And 2 is that our Democratic legislators can uphold that veto because we broke the Republican supermajority in 2018. Here are just a few examples of terrible bills the governor vetoed and that the Democratic legislators blocked just in the past couple of weeks. House Bill 324, the so-called critical race theory bill, which would have restricted teachers' ability to teach about U.S. racial history. House Bill 805, intended to deter people from exercising their constitutional rights to protest peacefully. And then House Bill 398, to remove a state law requiring handgun buyers to get a purchase permit from their local sheriff. This is a fragile protective system, protection against the tyranny of barely 1/2 of the voters over the other. Because to be clear, Republicans didn't earn a safe majority of seats. They created one with their gerrymandered maps. Look at these numbers here. If the Republicans win just 2 seats in the state Senate and 3 more seats in the state House in 2022, which is just around the corner, the Republicans, will regain their supermajority. We are very close to that happening.
So we need to fight to have the will of the people heard in 2 very different ways. The first fight is keeping Republicans out of a supermajority, and that is Neighbors on Call's immediate goal for 2022. That means protecting the Democratic incumbents we've got. Neighbors on Call volunteers have been talking to voters in key state legislative districts since March. We need to make sure voters know how good their Democratic incumbents are. So that is why we're canvassing with Senator Sidney Batch on Saturday at 10 a.m. in Holly Springs. The weather's looking very nice. And with Representative Ricky Hurtado the following weekend on September 26th. Those legislators are going to be in tough districts. So those are strategic places to work right now. If you don't feel comfortable canvassing, we understand that, and you can make it a lit drop. You can just leave the handouts at the door if you feel more comfortable with that. And if you're new to canvassing, you can request to be a silent canvasser. We'll pair you up with a pro who will do all the talking. Please join us if you are near the triangle, RSVP at Neighbors on Call, which I just put in the chat. and go to our website now and sign up. The second fight is what we're here to talk about tonight. And it's a longer term, nonpartisan one, and it requires immediate action. That is the fight for fair maps, maps that represent who our state is. Right now, we're at a key moment in the redistricting process when we need to make ourselves seen and heard. We cannot squander the opportunity. So please be prepared to put some effort into this in the next few days. We are very grateful to have Lekha Shupeck here with us tonight. She is the North Carolina State Director of All on the Line, a grassroots advocacy group affiliated with the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, which is chaired by Eric Holder. All on the Line is on a mission to end gerrymandering. They are targeting 9 states in 2021, including ours. Lekha grew up in a small town in North Carolina. She has a law degree from Duke University and a PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Previously, she served as the statewide advocacy and campaigns manager for ACLU of North Carolina, and Lekha joined the All on the Line team in 2019. Lekha, we know you are quite busy this week, and we really, really appreciate that you're able to be here with us. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Becca, for that great introduction. And thank you all for kind of sort of giving a really good history of the issue and the things that are at stake here. As you can see, I am in a hotel room right now. Therefore, I'm using free internet. So like, hopefully this works out. But if I get crackly or something, I mean, it comes with the job. But I am here right now in Elizabeth City because there was a hearing tonight in Elizabeth City, a public hearing in this redistricting process. This is the main way that main opportunity that people are going to have to participate in this process is through in-person public hearings, and also there are some virtual options to submit public testimony. So I will just give you a preview of where we are in the process and talk a little bit about what's happened so far. And then I do have a few slides to talk about what effective participation in the process looks like. So our process started towards the end of August, somewhat unexpectedly, like everything that happens in our state legislature. A joint committee meeting, joint Senate and House redistricting committee meeting was set. We all showed up, all the advocates who could, lots of volunteers who are in the area who heard about it. And we were told that, hey, redistricting is getting started. We're gonna go ahead and, hey, maybe next week we'll just go ahead and vote on redistricting criteria. Maybe in a couple of weeks we'll set our redistricting public hearing schedule. So we were really thrown into the deep end right away. We had a vote on redistricting criteria, which are the rules that they ostensibly use to draw the maps. And we did some rapid trainings. We had people show up to testify about criteria. The criteria that were set this year, we were told that they were the same criteria that were used in the 2019 case. So like Becca said, I joined All on the Line in 2019. We were participating in the partisan gerrymandering case that happened that year. In that year, there was a court order. The legislature was forced to redraw the state legislative and congressional maps, and that court order specified some criteria. I don't believe it was the best criteria. The court was basically going along with what some previous criteria had been, with some extra kind of regulations. However, and so, we saw things that are like pretty standard, like compactness measures. So, how compact or strung out a district is, population, obviously, incumbent protection was in there because it is traditional criteria in North Carolina, unfortunately. So that's what we saw in 2019, and we were told we were going to get criteria that were the same as in 2019. What we actually got was probably the most vague government document I've ever seen. The criteria that we got said things like, incumbent addresses may be considered. Considered how? Considered to protect them, considered to target them. It didn't specify. At the very end, it said, everything else is more important than this, but you may consider, you may consider things about people's communities. right? So that's the public input basically. Lowest priority, and you may consider it, but you don't have to. So that's what we saw in the criteria. The criteria this year was really disappointing. It really does not constrain the legislators and how they draw the maps in any way. It basically gives them free rein to do whatever they want. There's no mandates on what they do beyond equal population. So knowing that and having, tried to make an effort against that, we then went into a phase where they were going to schedule public hearings. We got a proposed list of 11 public hearings. Most people thought that was unacceptable since we have the time to have extensive public hearings. We were told that that list would be modified and voted on within the next week. It was never voted on. That list of proposed public hearings came out. There was a debate on it where many legislators, including lots of Democrats, said that this is inadequate. And then instead of having a vote, basically quietly, a public hearing schedule was dropped on the committee's website with no vote, even though they had told us there was going to be a vote. And so that is where we are right now. We are having these, they added a couple of hearings, so we're having 13 public hearings. That is not, I think, in anyone's opinion, adequate to cover all the people in the state and give them an adequate opportunity. Lots of huge places like Wake County is not getting its own public hearing, which is absurd. It is the largest county in our state. Guilford County is not getting its own public hearing. Many of the largest counties are missing out. Well, places that are entitled to have access to public hearings, but they're being prioritized, right? So right now I'm in Elizabeth City, which is, an important place in our state, but it's a smaller city. And we're having a hearing here, but we're not having a hearing in Wake County. So we are, trying to deal with the limited opportunities we have to give public hearings. That is where we are right now. This whole month of September, I'm going to be traveling, and as well as our digital organizer, to all the public hearings across the state to monitor what's going on there, and hopefully to also do some trainings. But basically we're in it right now, and this is the moment to participate. I know you all are, I think I'm sure that a lot of you are planning to go to the Durham public hearing. That's tomorrow night. It's probably the closest one that you're going to have to all of you. And so one thing I did want to talk about tonight is about how to effectively participate in that public hearing. I will just say that a lot of people are very passionate about this issue, and I'm really glad that that's the case, because redistricting affects everything. However, I think that a lot of time people are not given the tools they need to make use of the opportunity they have to participate in an effective way. So I will show you a few slides that talk about, why public testimony is important and what is the way to effectively testify. And then I will also give you one of our training worksheets. And this is a very short version of a much longer training we give. And I will link you all to the trainings we are going to do in the next 2 Mondays if you'd like to go to those. This stuff can all apply if you decide to submit a comment online, which you can do even if you comment in person. So anyway, I will go ahead and set up my presentation. Not that way. And I will share my screen. Okay. So, why is public testimony important? One of the things I do want to tell you, because I think that it's really easy for us to get demoralized in North Carolina because we have a Republican majority in the legislature. We feel like they're going to steamroll over everything, especially in the case of redistricting, because there is no governor's veto over redistricting maps. But we do have some evidence that effective testimony can have effects on maps. So there's a guy named Peter Miller at the Brennan Center who did a study in 2011 where he went to a lot of states across the West, states that had commissions, but also states where legislators drew the maps, and saw what kinds of comments were actually reflected in the maps in the end. So we know that there are ways that you can affect the maps, even if the maps are being drawn by legislators. So, and also we have seen this happen in North Carolina back in 2019 when the congressional maps were being redrawn. We saw maps that split Cumberland County in half. Cumberland County, which is where Fayetteville is, I'm sure you all know, has been a huge target for gerrymandering, particularly racial gerrymandering in the past. And the split that we saw, we thought was going to recreate a lot of those past gerrymanders. We saw it happening on the map that was going to be proposed, the map that we thought was going to go to the floor. We called upon all of our people, we let them know that this was happening. We did a lot of social media around it. We know that a lot of legislators got contacted around this issue, and the current congressional map does not split Cumberland County. That's not to say that the current congressional map is a fair congressional map, but it is better for the people of that county and for the people who live in Fayetteville than the previous version of map. So we know that this can have an effect. Also, public testimony is the only way that legislators are going to get the kind of information they need to draw fair maps in the first place, and advocate for fair maps. So if you're thinking about your Democratic legislator, if you want them to advocate for your community in this process, they need to hear from you as well to advocate effectively during the redistricting process, especially if your committee, if your legislator happens to be on the committee. I know Robert Reeves is from that area and is on the committee, but they need information from you as well so that they can advocate effectively during the mapping process. And when things come from them, from you to them, that can be really effective. The third thing to think about is that any public testimony becomes part of the public record, goes into the legislative record. And if there is litigation in the future, and this is North Carolina, so there's pretty much certain that there's going to be litigation, that public record can be used as evidence in those cases. It's definitely been used before, especially in the racial gerrymandering cases. The comments that people made about how racial gerrymandering was affecting their community has been used. And so that's why public testimony in general is so important. So let's just talk about what makes effective testimony versus ineffective testimony. And I just want to preface this by saying that I am definitely someone who has gone to a redistricting public hearing before and gotten up and told the committee that the process was unfair and that they suck and just been mad because it is an infuriating situation. However, that was not a good use of my time before them. It just was not. And so, we want to make sure that the comments you're giving, that, you get those 2 minutes, and that's all the 2 minutes you get to do a public in-person comment. And we want to make sure that that is the most effective thing, that you're doing in the most effective way possible. So an effective comment is feasibly mappable and geographically specific. So that means that it comments on something that is geographically specific to the community you live in. So, for example, I am from Southern Pines, if you all know where that is. I'm from Moore County. Currently, Moore County is split into the 8th and 9th congressional districts, and both of those districts are pairing places in the Sandhills area with the Charlotte suburbs, basically. So, if I was going to give testimony about that area, I might say, I believe that Moore County should be kept whole in a single congressional district, and that congressional district should include other Sandhills counties like Montgomery and Hoke and Scotland and Cumberland, and not include the Charlotte suburbs because those areas don't have anything to do with the area that I grew up in. So, okay, that's an example. Another example on a more local level that you could give, if you were talking about state legislative district, I could say, my neighborhood, the area that I consider sort of my community, is the area in Southern Pines that runs along Midland Road. It's one of the main roads in town. I believe that the community that I live in is the area that kind of stops right before you get to downtown Southern Pines and goes out, and it includes the hospital that's on the other side of the traffic circle because that's where a lot of people who live in that community work. Those are examples of the kinds of geographically specific comments that we know are effective. Something that defines your community geographically, talks about why it's a community, what interests it shares in common, and says what I want them to do, right? I want them to I want them to create a Sand Hills Congressional District, or I want them to keep Midland Road together with the hospital. So feasibly mappable, written from the heart by members of the community, means it's genuine. It's genuine to something you actually want, something that your community actually needs, right? So actual information about your community. And then being specific about what you want and why you want them to do it. So like I said, I want a Sand Hills Congressional District. It should include these counties. It should not be paired with counties from the Charlotte suburbs. Ineffective comments are comments that, you know, don't relate to the actual process of drawing maps. So if you're criticizing the process, but you're including things that are not going to be realistically happen, that's actually one of the things that can make it ineffective. So if you say, I want you to stop right now, and I want you to create an independent commission right now and let them advise you on drawing these maps, I think anyone, even a favorable legislator, would be like, I don't know how to make that happen. That's, you know, we haven't done that. We don't have the procedure for that. We don't, even a legislator who believes in an independent commission would be like, I agree with you, but we're drawing maps right now. So that kind of thing is not effective, right? Because a legislator who really doesn't agree with you can say, well, we're not doing that. We're doing this. Like, why are you even talking about that? So again, asking them to create an independent commission or asking them to do things that, you know, that are not practical is ineffective. Using like statements and talking points that don't have anything to do with your personal community's needs, like community you live in's needs, you know, that's not really contributing anything that they're not going to hear from other quarters. So it's not, you know, it's not necessarily going to be helpful. And then talking about communities you're not a part of. So, you know, I grew up in Southern Pines, but I live in Raleigh now. So I probably wouldn't talk about Southern Pines, even though I grew up there and know it a little bit, because I don't live there now. And that's no longer like, you know, my home community. And therefore I think people who are living there and from there are the ones who should be who should be saying what the maps like there look like. So talking about your community in particular. So that's effective versus ineffective comments. Some questions to ask yourself as you're writing a comment to help write an effective comment is thinking about what your community of interest is. So community of interest is a legal term. It's actually not been well legally defined, but it basically means a group, you know, a geographic area where the people there share a common political interest. Could be based on culture, could be based on economic factors, could be things like environmental factors. But those factors mean that those people would be best represented if they are kept together in one district. So that would be something like, if you think about NCA&T, right? NCA&T was notoriously split up by previous congressional maps. The students at NCA&T, which is the largest HBCU, have an interest in voting together. They have similar issues. They have, you know, they have lots of reasons that bring them together that make them cohesive. That's a community. Something even larger would be, you know, the area from Fayetteville down to Wilmington that is in that watershed that is affected by Gen X chemicals. That is a common thing that those people have an interest in being properly regulated, that they might want to, you know, be together in a congressional district to vote on. So those are the kinds of examples of like what makes a community of interest. Community of interest could be anything. It could also be, this is the area where, you know, all the families that go to the same school as my children do live, and we all have an interest in the education funding of that school. So there are lots of things that can make a community of interest. So think about what is that for you? It could operate at a lot of different levels too. So other thing to think about is what level of the map that you want to comment on. So here we have the ideal populations for each district, which is roughly the population that is needed for each district. So, you know, again, like I was giving the example before, if I was talking about a congressional district, because of the population in Moore County, I might talk about counties. I might say, I want Moore County to be whole. I want it to be paired with these other counties. Right now I live in Raleigh. Raleigh's a really big city. It's going to probably have a congressional district mostly to itself. There maybe have to be some kind of split in Raleigh. So I maybe want to talk about, I want my neighborhood to be with the rest of the city of Raleigh in a congressional district. But if I'm talking about a House district, that's a lot smaller. I live in Southeast Raleigh, so I might say, I think all of Southeast Raleigh should be included. And this is the boundaries of what I think Southeast Raleigh is. I think it goes down to 440 here, and it's, you know, bound by Rock Quarry Road on this side or something like that. So those are two things that you might want to think about. Another thing that can be helpful is looking at current and previous maps and thinking about, do those work for you or do they not work for you? How do they make sense for your community? So one of the really effective tools to use, and I can put this in the chat in a minute, is the Find Your Legislators tool. That's on the legislative website. So if you go to the legislative website, it'll be somewhere on the top. And if you put your address in there, you will be able to see the current district. So you'll be able to see where your own home fits in the current districts, all the districts, congressional, state Senate, and state House. And so you can see, do I like the current districts or not? Representable is another program that we have used in the past to help people draw their own community maps. So if you're a very visual person and it would help you to give your testimony to be able to actually create a visual map, this is a tool we've been using. It's very easy to use. It's like Google Maps. It's sort of like point and click, point and unclick. That's it. You know, we chose it because it is user friendly. And so, you know, that's another thing you can do if that's helpful to you. And then we also have a testimony worksheet that I'll share with you all that can, you know, just has some prompts to walk you through as you're writing your testimony. And we hope that it's, you know, helpful for you as you're drafting it. One thing I would say that we get a lot of questions about is, you know, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, I like my current district. Like, I don't think anything's wrong with it. What do I do? North Carolina has grown so much. We are adding a 14th congressional district. That's going to shift everything around for congressional districts. And that also applies to state legislative districts. North Carolina, especially the areas around the triangle where I'm sure a lot of you all live, have grown a ton. Districts cannot stay the same just for population reasons. They're going to shift. So don't think that just because you like your current district, it will just stay the way it is and you don't have to say anything. So if you like your current district, it makes sense to advocate, okay, what do I like about it? Let me go talk about that in a specific way. All right, so I think this is the last slide I'm going to use for you all, but there are these in-person public hearings. There is a schedule on the legislative website. I think I also have a schedule. We have tweeted out the schedule and I can share that with you as well. There is a hearing in Durham tomorrow night. There's a hearing in Alamance on Thursday. Those are probably the most applicable ones for you all. So if you feel safe going to an in-person public hearing, and I know that that's an issue for everyone for a lot of good reasons, COVID is not going anywhere right now, and that's scary. But if you are safe, you feel safe going to something like that. And I will say the hearings that I've been to so far have been in auditoriums, have been really well spaced apart. You know, most people are wearing masks. Unfortunately, a lot of Republican legislators are not wearing masks, but most of the attendees are wearing masks. And so if you do feel safe, I would encourage you to go, because legislators can ignore you if you're saying it to their face. It's a lot more likely to get covered by local media, and that can be really important for its influence. And also, there are a lot of people who can't go to these public hearings, right? They have to work, they don't have childcare, there isn't a hearing that's close to them. You know, they don't have transportation in general. Like, there are a lot of people who are excluded by these hearings because they've not been made accessible. So if you are able to go, I would love for you to think of yourself as going sort of on behalf of all those people who are being excluded by this process. Take advantage of the opportunity that you do have. If you can't go to an in-person public hearing, though, there is an online portal that I can, you know, this is the link to it, I can share it with you, and you can submit a comment online. Comments in person, like I was saying earlier, are limited to 2 minutes. Comments online can be, I think, up to 1,200 words. So they can be quite a bit longer. So say you want to give one version of your testimony in person, you may want to do a longer one online that's more detailed. You can submit online comments as much as you want. You can submit 5 or 10 of them, 20 of them if you want to. They can be on all different topics. Feel free to do that. I would say if you can't make it to an in-person hearing, please, try to use the online portal. We have virtual public hearings question mark here because we were hoping that there would be some kind of virtual option. Doesn't seem like they're making it that an option to participate. Doesn't seem like they're even planning to live stream these hearings. So unfortunately, that's not the case, but we have these in-person public hearings and we have the online portal. So that's sort of I'm going to stop sharing. That's sort of my hobby horse for today is these public hearings. That's what we're in right now. And that's really the most important way you can participate and I think affect the process. So yeah, I'd love to take any questions. I see there's a ton of questions in the chat that I didn't see because I was looking at slides. Becca, I'm not sure how you want to work on this though.
Thank you, Lekha. Dina Papazoglu, who's one of the members of the NOC leadership team, is going to be giving you questions from the chat in a minute, but I just wanted to cover a couple things before we turned it over. Is it useful to go to the hearings even if you're not going to testify, like just to be in the audience?
Yeah, I think documentation is really important, if you, I go and live tweet these hearings, I'm not giving testimony, but it's good because it helps, me even trying to live tweet is hard, right? I'm trying to so everyone can give better coverage, then these people's words can get across better. And I think that is helpful. I think it's helpful to see how this stuff operates. And so if you want to go sort of as a witness, I would say, go and then use that opportunity to sort of publicize what you saw.
And are there other points in the process that we should be looking out for, just so we all have sort of a heads up about what to expect when we should be prepared to take action?
Yeah, so looking forward, so we are in sort of in-person public hearings for this whole month of September. I anticipate that once we hit October, we will see the actual map drawing. That's when that will be happening. If it's anything like 2019, we will see sort of live streaming of map drawing. That is also when they will probably choose county clusters. County clusters are this thing that North Carolina does that nowhere else does. They're very important and consequential and weird and complicated. It's an important moment. I know On the Line will spend some time explaining that better once we get there, but there will be some crucial moments like that in the process once we get into October. I think that's when the legislature is going to really start to do the actual work of the map drawing. Also, we have been told that there will be no tour of public hearings after proposed maps are published, which is hugely problematic because what people really need to be doing is commenting on the maps that are proposed, giving themselves some substance to react to. But there will be, they said, some kind of hearing in Raleigh after proposed maps. So if you are within range and able to attend, that is another big opportunity that you may want to look out for. And then subsequent to that, again, we will probably be doing lots of on and off accountability, rapid response accountability work as we see things coming up in the map. So we think people should jump on, the way I was talking about that split in Cumberland County previously. And then, of course, advocacy around the votes on the maps in committee and the votes on the maps on the floor.
Okay, so it sounds like we can take our cues from you at many different points. And right now, this is the focus on what we should be doing, and then keep our eyes open for other points to talk about the county groupings, the specific maps, or specific things that are things to rally around.
Yeah, we will keep you in the loop. If you follow us on any social media or if you're on our mailing list, you'll know when things are happening from us. But for the month of September, it's just in-person public hearings.
Okay, that's very helpful. I think there are a lot of questions in the chat that probably reflect what a lot of people are wondering about. So Dina, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Becca, and thank you, Lekha. That was wonderful. I've just passed along some questions that we've collected from the chat. One is, will it be possible to get the slides that you presented?
I think Yeah, I think in general, you know, our organization, because we are involved in litigation, is really finicky about giving out slides. We have used these slides in other presentations that we have videos of, if you'd like to review them. And then also, again, I'll share the worksheet with you, which has a lot of the information in it. So I'm sorry, I'm not really allowed to share slides, but there are other ways for you to get that information from us.
Okay, sure thing. Thank you. And a few people I think we're just ruminating on attending a meeting outside our community and how we can be effective in that situation. And is it possible a way to argue for nonpartisan districts overall, or, you know, is there a way to address that?
So I think in terms of attending one hearing that's not in your community, I think that's totally fine. You know, if there's another one that you can make it to and you can't make it to one that's close to you, I think that's perfectly fine. It all goes into the public record in the same way. You can talk about the community you're from, no matter where the public hearing is. As far as sort of nonpartisan districts, what I would say is we kind of consider communities of interest. When you talk about your community of interest, that is nonpartisan, right? That's the core of what nonpartisan redistricting is. It's reflecting the actual needs of people in community and what makes them feel fairly represented. So as long as, you know, I'd say, like, you know, honestly, I would say if someone gets up and makes a public comment and they're like, I think that the seat distribution between Democrats and Republicans should be X, Y, or Z. I don't think that that's actually a very helpful comment, right? It's easy to dismiss. But if you show up and you're saying, you know, my community is defined by these borders, these are the issues that we share, this is why we should be together in one district, that is what the kind of thing that we know to be effective and is not, and that's nonpartisan. And that's what nonpartisan redistricting would, in theory, look like. If we had an independent commission, it would be people giving that input and the independent commission trying to reflect that in their maps.
Thank you. And for the county groupings, do you think they've already actually set them and just not published them?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if legislative leadership has already decided what the county groupings are going to be. We know that there are a lot of options this year because of the change in population, but we don't know what they're going to choose. So yeah, I think that's probably true.
Okay. Let's see. Has there been an independent study done that recommends how the different districts should be drawn for the state and what would seem fair? You know, folks are thinking it might be a little daunting to go to those tools and create our own maps to then talk about.
Yeah. So I think one thing I'll say is that, and I'll share the representable link with you all, but when I was talking about representable, it's not asking you to draw a district. It's just asking you to draw your community. You don't have to comply with any redistricting criteria or meet a certain population. It's just asking you to outline your community so that you can talk about it in an effective way. I would not ask you all to try to draw a district map because I don't, first of all, that's super complicated and hard. I don't want to do it. You know, it's a really high barrier. Representable, when we talk about it, is more of a tool to just help you draw your community so you can talk about it. It's not asking you to draw a district for your community. So that's sort of the difference there. I know that there are a lot of groups out there and a lot of different people who've drawn different proposed maps. Particularly, I think there's a lot of congressional maps out there that people are kind of drawing and putting up on Twitter and stuff, but I don't have a particular opinion about any of those, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And is it helpful to attend the meeting and just not speak, like show numbers, you know, just show the audience numbers in the, you know, just to be there?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what I said before. I think that if you do attend and you don't plan to speak, you know, try to use that opportunity to document what people say in some way, take pictures, post them on Twitter, to sort of bring more attention to it. I think it's, you know, I mean, honestly, when I'm going to public hearings, that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to document what the people there are saying and make sure that there's some attention to it, to that's happening. So that's what I would say, is that I think it's a good opportunity, if you can, to kind of bring some more attention to this process.
All right, thank you. And Do you think there'd be any point of community groups organizing and hosting their own community meetings after the maps are drawn, even if there are not, hosting official hearings? We could invite legislators and community people.
Yeah, I think that that would actually be great. I think that that kind of thing can be really important when we're not given other opportunities. The thing that I would say is I would say try to find some way to document that, encourage people to submit whatever they're saying online as well. Be recording the meeting that's happening so that it can be referred to later. That kind of stuff is really important for, there's sort of the official public record, and then there's sort of the like kind of ambient record of things that are happening in the press, things that are happening amongst advocacy groups and community members, and that is maybe influential in a more indirect way, but we've seen courts respond to that kind of thing.
Thank you. Okay, harking back to when you were talking about the criteria and how there's really nothing much binding, but there is the one which is equal population. Can you say a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, equal population, sort of like one person, one vote, is the top most important criteria in redistricting anywhere you go in the country. That's always the most important thing. That's always going to be at the top of the list, just because one person, one vote is such a fundamental principle of our voting system. And so basically what that means for North Carolina is I showed you those ideal populations. All congressional districts have to have the same population down to one person. So they have to be exactly the same population. State legislative districts have to be within plus or minus 5%. So 10% total. That's actually quite a big variance. But that is what equal population means legally on the state legislative level.
Thank you. Okay, the Georgia legislature is posting all of the public comments online. How can we get North Carolina to do that?
I think that that is one of the things that sort of direct advocacy with the committee. I know that we've done like sort of LTE campaigns around public comment and making it accessible. That feels like it's sort of like a public pressure thing. So contacting the committee members is probably the best way to advocate for that. I know in particular, Democracy NC has done some really good stuff around public comment. We also have some public testimony recommendations that speak on like how those should be publicized. So I would say that contacting members of the committee is probably the best thing to do to advocate for that.
Okay, great. And along the same lines of trying to sort of getting the word out, we're hearing that Common Cause is experimenting with just setting up a phone by the mic and live streaming the hearing. Is that something we could sort of do systematically?
Yeah, I mean, if you have someone who can do that kind of thing technologically, even if it's super simple, I think that that would actually be great. We've actually been talking about trying to find a videographer who we could bring with us to these hearings to do stuff like that. But any way that you can get it, public would be wonderful. So I'd say go for it.
Thank you. Let's see, I'm scanning my list. I think the other things have been more or less kind of, several ones were about, attending the meeting if that wasn't your district and things like that. So I think we're covered, but Susan, Lindsay, have you noticed anything I might have missed? Anything good that we could throw back out here? Or audience, this is your chance if you didn't already put your question in there.
So I think that the one thing is that a lot of people are frustrated with, they're pretty okay with their district, but are very frustrated with statewide gerrymandering. And so I think that some of the things that we've just been talking about advocating with the committee to make the public comments are good things about that. But that's a real source of frustration for those of us who live in this blue area. Mm-hmm. And so how can we effectively speak to the process or the communities, you know,
Yeah.
we
So,
best be used.
yeah. So one thing I would say is that, again, I just want to say, especially blue areas have exploded in population so much that your district will not stay the same. It will be different. I don't really think that there's anywhere in the state that's had any kind of population growth where the districts will stay exactly the same. So if there are things about your district that you want to keep, I would encourage you to advocate for those. I would say that if you really and really truly genuinely feel that you have no geographic comments to make, then I think only if you really have nothing to say geographically, maybe then comment on what you would like to see out of the process, in particular, like being very, very specific. So specificity applies across the board to comments. So I think things like saying, I want to see a public tour of a tour of public hearings after proposed maps, and there should be at least 20 sites, and these major counties should definitely be hit. Something like that. Or, there should be a separate website for all redistricting information. It should contain transcripts of the public hearings, live streams, the online comment portal, being very, very specific about what you want to see. If you don't have any geographic, information to give the committee, I would say that is the sort of second best thing, is to be very, very specific about what different thing you would want to see of the process. I think just showing up and saying, I want the process to be more transparent, I honestly feel like you're wasting your time then. If you want the process to be more transparent, say exactly how you want that to happen. That has a much better chance of having some kind of influence.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A variation on this theme, which might be more or less the same answer, but what about, the fact that, those of us who can attend might generally be the, the privileged folks, and, we want to, give voice to the, people who are affected who aren't able to attend, is that, is there any sort of nuance to what you would advise us to be able to do there?
I think I'm just very firmly in the belief that good redistricting is about properly representing real people, what they really want for their communities. So if you happen to know people who are in more affected communities, I would say try to reach out to them and encourage them to participate in the process. I think that's one thing. And, again, like I said, if you really have nothing on that level, commenting the process and asking for something very specific can be helpful. I think that I think it's really hard, right? We're in a situation where we have a very frustrating, very imperfect process. And so a lot of things that are true, like we should have an independent commission, like legislative districts should be proportionate to statewide election outcomes. I think that though all those things are true, like I believe those things, but I think right now the question is, if you're given only 2 minutes in front of the committee, what's the thing that's most likely to have an actual impact on the maps? And let's do that thing. And then next year, let's spend a lot of time advocating for actual redistricting reform. I know that that's a very different perspective from what a lot of groups have, but all in the line, we're trying to be very, very pragmatic and evidence-based about what we're telling people to do. And I know that that's not always the most satisfying thing, but we think it's just really important to the long-term future, considering that if there is redistricting litigation, we want the state to be in the best possible position to get fair maps coming out of any possible future litigation. And that's what a lot of this is about, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
Thank you. And is there a way you would suggest that we could advocate for a competitive 4th congressional district for David Price? I guess, over and above what you've already advised with speaking about our own.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard for you to just say you want a competitive district. I think the question would be more like, what areas would be included in a district that would be competitive? So, what areas, you know, if you look at his current district, are there things about it that don't make sense to you, areas that you don't think should be in it, or areas that don't make sense being, if you live in that district, don't make sense being included with your community? What areas would you prefer to have instead? And that may be something that would create a more competitive district. You know, I really believe that, you know, most people, the packing and cracking that's done in gerrymandering doesn't actually reflect what most people want. When, you know, communities of color and Black communities are racially gerrymandered, just because you're cramming all of the Black voters together doesn't mean that that's good representation for them or what they want or how they actually live or relate to people who live around them. And so I think that that's one of the strongest things that works against gerrymandering is just genuinely, who do people actually consider to be their community? What does that actually look like to them? Can we make the maps reflect that?
Thank you. Great. Is there, Susan, Lindsay, did you see anything else? There's some flying through the chat, but I think we're getting most of them.
I think so too. I think we've covered a lot of it. Donna Kay asked where we can go to get ideas about what to recommend. But go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh, so if you're talking about recommendations for public input, I will just go ahead and give you the link to like our public hearing recommendations. I know that I believe Democracy NC has also put out some that are pretty similar to ours. I think ours are probably just a little bit like shorter and simpler. But I think, you know, other advocacy groups have talked about sort of what they want to see process-wise, if that's what you're thinking about.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for the great questions. And I think it's time to hand it back over to Becca.
Thank you. And thank you, Lekha, for taking all our questions. And I'm understanding just from a personal point of view, like what the challenge is of writing the comment and trying to wrap my head around how I can participate and feel like I'm saying something useful. So just tell me if I'm sort of summarizing correctly, I guess, what you're saying, which is, you know, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say, like, I don't want to advocate for my community at the expense of another. Like, if it turned out that me saying, well, keep my community together actually ends up creating some district that isn't fair or something like that, I wouldn't want to have advocated for that. And so I'm not always sure like what responsibility I'm carrying by advocating for a certain thing if I don't see the big picture. But I think what I hear you saying is districts end up fairer when people advocate for their own communities, and that we should trust in that process and do the part that we know how to do and trust that that is a helpful part of the bigger process.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I really don't think it's helpful to kind of game out, try to predict what kind of map, you know, could possibly go this way or that way. None of us really, I don't have that kind of skill, right? Very few people do. It's a very highly technical skill to draw the whole map and think about all the possibilities. Advocating in a genuine way for what you actually want to see for your community is something that only you can do, right? You know, there are all these academics out here who can do the math. That doesn't mean that something that comes out of an algorithm is more representative of your community than what you could say. If I came and told you that the math says that your neighborhood should be split into 5 different districts because that looks nicer in the math, that's not going to resonate with you. That's not going to feel right to you. So fair maps are actually the things that make people feel fairly represented. And yeah, I think that's true. I think that's what you should do, and you shouldn't really second guess it, because that's the information that I want. That's the information that those mapping guys want. They want to know that. They don't know that. They can sit there and try to do maps that are fair by some mathematical means, but that's not reflective of communities. And the really good mappers out there want their maps to mean something to the people who live in them. So I'd say that you all have the information that is needed to make this process fair?
There's one last question that I guess it's more of a comment that it's come up in several different ways, and I don't really know how to put it as a question, just to reflect it back to you and hear what you think, which is the biggest negative impact we're feeling about our districts is really about what's happening statewide and how that affects our communities, not so much, how about our specific community, but that the statewide decisions negatively impact my community or another community.
Yeah. Well, I think what I would say is you all do a ton of other work, right? You do the stuff, you canvass, you advocate for electeds or people who are running for office who reflect the values that you want to see. You try to do the work in a lot of other ways that try to make that change. The redistricting process is this really weird marginal thing that happens, and it has a lot of strange constraints, and it's very complex, and there's ways to interact with it that are effective, and there's ways to interact with it that are less effective. What I would say is we can't try to make the redistricting process do the election for us, right? It's just a different part of the work. As much as, again, I want to say, like, I identify so much with how frustrating a lot of this is. I am very frustrated with our redistricting process. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see me be frustrated with our redistricting process and its constraints and the way it's done a million times a day. But what I'd say is there's an effective way to operate in that process. There's an effective way to advocate in the same way that there's an effective way and an ineffective way to do electoral work and canvas and do all those things. And let's operate within what's effective in the redistricting process and try to do some of the other work when we do those other things that you and Neighbors on Call do. You are doing those things, right? You're doing the things that you're trying to make our electeds more reflective in the state. So I think that's what I would say, is just that the redistricting process is its own weird thing, and there's what we know, we hopefully know how to interact with it in an effective way, and let's do that, and then let's do the other work.
That's so helpful, and goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, which is this is a long-term, huge issue about fairness, and we have to participate. We can't just say, I don't have a role. We have to participate in it, and I really appreciate that you're saying pragmatism matters. And then this other path is what Neighbors on Call is focused on for 2022, which is elections are coming and it's time to do something about it, which is a good segue to me reminding everybody to please sign up at neighborsoncall.org for canvassing on Saturday with Sydney Batch and the following Sunday with Ricky Hurtado. And also on our website are all the links to, there's an actions site, so you can find where all the hearings are and the link to the portal. And we'll add the link that Lekha was talking about resources to use in writing your comments. So we'll also put all of that there.
Can I add also too that on our website, sorry, throw this in, that there's a link to not only the current public policy update, the North Carolina policy update, but it's like a blog, so you can scroll backwards through time. And if you don't remember what House Bill H805 is about, you can go there and it'll give you a brief write-up and then a link to a news story that explains it. So it's a tremendous resource because it's so hard to keep track of these things that are happening.
So, Lekha, I just want to thank you again. I know we threw a lot of really hard questions, and I really appreciate how much you engaged with what everyone's struggling with. And as Jennifer Bremer just put in the chat, this is a civil rights struggle. It's not a quick victory, and we absolutely have to keep at it. And we really appreciate you coaching us about how to do that most effectively. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Becca, for having me. And as a last thing, I'm just going to put the testimony worksheet. So if some of you are planning to go to the hearing tomorrow in Durham, you can, if you want to, use this worksheet to start drafting your comment if you haven't already.
Great, thank you. And let's just, while we have everybody here, put in the chat if you're going. And I know not everybody lives near Durham. There's probably folks from all across the state on the call. So if you're planning to go to one of the hearings, please let us know in the chat. We'll keep that open for a minute. So
Yeah, I will be in Rocky Mount and in Greenville the next 2 nights. And then Bree Bro, who you probably know, who was our digital organizer, will be in Durham and Alamance County the next 2 nights.
Great. Thank you. Good to know that there's a friendly face there when you go.
Yeah, come say hi.
Okay, good.
That's terrific.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
And we will
you.
see you again soon and follow carefully.